8 super important real estate terms you need to know. I'm making this video because when I started out, I had no clue what a lot of these words meant, and not knowing these phrases kind of affected my ability to feel calm and confident when talking to clients. So I'm sharing these so you can feel confident starting out in your real estate career. So these 8 words: MLS, that's the multiple listing service. Number 2, closing costs. Number 3, CMA, comparative market analysis, also known as a home value report. Number 4, contingency. Number 5, equity. Number 6, title and deed. Number 7, escrow. And number 8, it's actually a 3-parter. Number 8 is understanding the contracts and knowing the contracts relevant to your state. So for my state, it's purchase agreement, the RPA, the listing agreement, the RLA, and the last but not least, the buyer broker agreement. So in your state, they could be named something different. Just know that in real estate, you're going to know a lot of different acronyms. We love our acronyms. Let's go ahead and dive into what each of these things are and what they mean. Number 1, the MLS. You probably already know what that is. It's the multiple listing service. This is the database where all agents can post what homes are for sale and what the status of that home is. Now, the MLS syndicates or sends their data over to Zillow, Redfin, Trulia, Homes.com, whatever else. The MLS right now is the main hub for properties that are being sold, what we would call on market. Another note about the MLS: in the past, the MLS is what allowed agents to gatekeep information. Nowadays, sites like Zillow, Redfin, wherever else, they also have home search. The difference is MLS will still have a little bit more detail. So agents do have a little bit more information than consumers. Term number 2, closing costs. We've all probably heard closing costs before. Like, what are closing costs? And so it's really important when you are talking to clients that you have a good idea of what closing costs will be in their area. So the way I like to frame it for my clients is that the closing costs are the other services that go along with buying or selling a home. Some common closing costs, and it will depend on your state, right? Could be attorney fees, escrow fees, title insurance, notary, lender fees, property taxes, and whatever other costs are associated with buying or selling a home in your area. It's really important to know for both buyers and sellers what those closing costs or a good estimation will be, right? Buyers are concerned with affordability, and sellers are concerned with, what am I going to net? How much am I taking home from the sale of this home? Speaking of sellers, this next one, third phrase, CMA, comparative market analysis, that's the real estate agent term, but most regular people don't know what that means. So I like to call it a home value report. Is basically a report that shows all the recently sold homes in the area. So you would provide this to a seller and basically say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, in the last 6 months, here's all the homes that are similar within the same kind of square footage, the number of bedrooms and bathrooms, the same features. Here's what all of them sold for. So then you can provide a range, or if they want a specific number, so you can share, this is the estimated home value. So this is also very important for buyers when they're submitting offers. Buyers are going to want to make sure that they're not overpaying. Everyone wants to get a deal when they're buying a house, right? But they don't want to be taken advantage of. So you're going to, before you submit offers, prep a home value report for all the recently sold homes in the area. Okay, the fourth term that is very important, you'll probably hear it a lot, is contingency. And so what is a contingency? Contingencies are conditions that must be met for a real estate contract to go through. And the main contingencies that we have here in Southern California, at least, are the inspection, the appraisal, and the loan contingency. And so it's really important as a real estate agent, a brand new agent, it's really important that you understand how each of those contingencies can affect the way you write an offer and how those things can either help or hurt your chances of getting your offer accepted. And on the other side, if you're representing sellers, you need to understand those contingencies because it's the same thing. You'll need to take into account how the contingencies in the offers being written make it more or less likely for that buyer to close on your seller's property. So if you thought this video was helpful so far and you want more videos like this, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. Term number 5, equity. So if you never bought or sold a home, you're probably not going to know what equity is. Equity is really just the difference between the market value of a property and the remaining loan balance. Equity represents how much of the home the owner actually owns. So you're probably wondering, like, why do we need to know what equity is? Equity is going to be really important when you're talking to a seller. So sellers are going to want to know, how much equity do I have in the home and how can I best utilize that? Maybe they want to refinance, maybe they want to take a home equity line of credit, maybe they want to sell the property to buy a new one. So understanding equity is going to be really important. Phrase number 6. This one is actually 2 words, title and deed. So title and deed are basically the pieces of home ownership. The difference between title and deed is that the deed is the physical component. It's an actual official written document stating that this person has ownership of this property. Now, title is like the legal concept that refers to your ownership rights as a homeowner. And so here's like a good way to remember the difference. You can own a physical copy of a book, but you can't hold the book's title in your hand. A book title and a property title work the same. Both are concepts, and neither is a physical object. However, a deed is actually a physical document that remains in your possession after you purchase a property. Term number 7, escrow. So this one always comes up, right? And there's 2 things to note about escrow. There's escrow companies, and then there's the escrow process, right? So the escrow process is basically where there's an independent third party that holds and referees the transaction based on the purchase agreement. So it's an independent third party. They should be unbiased. And that company is going to handle the real estate transaction based on the contract that's agreed upon between the seller and the buyer. That escrow is there. That escrow company and process is there to protect both seller and buyer and make sure that everyone is acting upon what they agreed on in that contract. That leads straight into the 8th term, which is actually a 3-parter. So starting out in real estate, even experienced agents, you need to know your relevant contracts. The contracts are what make transactions happen, and the contracts dictate what's supposed to happen in escrow and how the transaction is supposed to go down. So in California, we have the listing agreement, the RLA. That is between the seller and the listing agent. That agreement basically states that this seller wants this agent to represent them, and the terms of their agreement, the timeline, the price, the compensation, marketing, goes over all that stuff. Then the second one is the buyer broker agreement. Right? That is the same thing, but for buyers and agents. It's basically going to outline what property or all properties that the buyer wants this agent to represent them on, the time frame, and potential compensation. And then last but not least, the third main contract is the purchase agreement. In California, that's called the RPA. And that is between the seller and the buyer. And it's basically written up by the listing agent and the buyer's agent. And it basically outlines the terms of how the buyer wants to purchase the property from the seller. And so once that purchase agreement is signed by all parties and it is agreed upon, then they can go to escrow. When I first started out, I actually wish I spent a little bit more time understanding these contracts. So you might not be in California, but get familiar with the relevant contracts in your area. I'm making these videos to try to help real estate agents have a better career, make more money, take care of their families. If you think that I missed any super important terms, please drop in the comments something that you would have liked to know or something that you think I've missed.